the Duke who lived as a gardener until his kingdom needed him back. The morning mist curled through the emerald hills of County Kerry, where the Duke clung to rose petals and ivy kissed the stone walls of Glenrowan Estate. Beneath a battered cap and dirt-streaked gloves, the gardener of Glenrowan moved quietly along the garden path, pruning with the practiced hand of someone who had found peace among plants. No one who passed him suspected he was anything other than what he claimed, a quiet, gentle soul who preferred soil to silver, silence to speeches. No one imagined that under the faded linen shirt beat the heart of a man once heir to a duchy, once burdened with titles, duty, and the unforgiving gaze of the British elite. He was known as Mr. Jameson. Not too talkative, not too distant. The children on the estate liked him, for he carved wooden birds from tree bark and spoke of nature as if it were a living scripture. The older maids speculated he had once been an Oxford professor who'd lost his mind in the war. But only Jameson and the loyal housekeeper, old Maeve, knew the truth. His real name was Edward Francis Alaric Wyndham, the 9th Duke of Westerly, who had vanished 30 years ago in a storm of scandal, betrayal, and whispered threats. Edward had once walked through palaces, conversed with prime ministers, and danced with foreign royalty. But that world, cold and ruthless, had turned on him when he had refused to marry the princess chosen for him by his parents and had instead given his heart to a commoner, Isabel Moore, a violinist of Irish descent. Their love had bloomed in secret, a fragile rose in the frost of aristocratic disapproval. But when the truth surfaced, his father disowned him, his inheritance was threatened, and Isabel was hounded by the press until she fled to America, dying there before Edward could follow. The pain had broken something in him. He vanished soon after, presumed dead in the river, where his clothes were found abandoned on a bridge. But he had not died. He had crossed into Ireland, away from the public eye and the burdens of title, and found sanctuary with Maeve, an old friend of his mother's. Glenrowan, a grand but quiet estate owned by a recluse, became his home. In the gardens, he found something he'd never had in palaces: peace. He tended roses, sculpted hedges, taught children how to plant herbs, and disappeared into a life with no mirrors or cameras. Yet fate, it seemed, had not forgotten Edward. On a bleak February morning, a black sedan rolled into Glenrowan. 2 suited men stepped out and asked for the gardener. The staff looked at them, puzzled. One of them, a well-dressed man in his 50s, recognized Edward immediately and paled. "Your Grace," he whispered, "please forgive the intrusion, but the crown needs you." Edward froze. That title, he hadn't heard it in decades. He wanted to turn his back, to retreat to his greenhouse and ignore them. But curiosity gnawed at him. And then they told him. The royal family had suffered a horrific loss. A terrorist attack on a diplomatic tour had taken the lives of several heirs, including Edward's cousin, the current Duke of Westerly. The title and responsibilities now fell, legally and publicly, on Edward, presumed dead. If he refused to return, the family would lose not only the dukedom's political influence, but vital charity legacies tied to the Westerly Trust. Britain stood on a knife's edge as confidence in the monarchy waned, and whispers of republicanism grew louder. He refused. For 2 weeks, the men returned, trying to persuade him. Newspapers began printing rumors of the lost Duke. Glenrowan became surrounded by curious journalists, but Maeve turned them away with the fury of a lioness. But then came a letter from a little girl in Wales, Amelia, age 9. Her parents had died in the same explosion that had taken Edward's cousin. She had written, "Dear Duke, they say you don't want to be a duke anymore. But my teacher said you were brave. If you become a duke again, can you help people like me? We don't have anyone left." Edward read the letter over and over. That night, he walked alone to the highest hill in Glenrowan and stood under the stars. He thought of Isabel, of the world he'd left behind, of the child who'd written to him. He could not ignore what his name, tarnished as it was, still meant. 3 days later, dressed in a simple dark suit, Edward Francis Alaric Wyndham crossed the Irish Sea and returned to England. His reappearance sent shockwaves through Britain. Parliament was stunned. The press erupted. Conspiracy theories swirled, and royal advisors scrambled to handle the unprecedented event. Yet Edward remained calm, dignified, and unwilling to be molded by palace protocols. He refused bodyguards, attended public meetings with farmers and school teachers, and spoke passionately about mental health, education, and land reform. He declined to move into the family's ancestral castle, choosing instead a modest residence near a restored community garden in East Sussex. There, he started a program offering horticultural therapy to veterans and orphans. His story inspired novels, films, and heated debate in Parliament. Many in the aristocracy resented him, but the people loved him. They saw in him something real, a man who had chosen humility over honor, love over legacy, and still returned to serve not out of ambition, but out of compassion. Over the years, Edward rebuilt the Westerly name, transforming its fortune into a series of trusts for education, healthcare, and the environment. He founded a memorial music school in Isabel's name and visited Amelia's orphanage annually, later becoming her godfather when she was adopted. When he died at the age of 92, surrounded by gardenias and sunflowers, his funeral drew millions. Not for the title he bore, but for the life he lived. On his gravestone, beneath the dukedom's crest, were inscribed the words he had once said to Maeve. "It is not where you are born, nor what you are called, but how gently you walk among others that defines your greatness." And so, the Duke who once lived as a gardener became something far greater than a nobleman. He became a legend.